Welcome to the ReaderHouse Author Roundtable, where authors from all walks of life come together to discuss the trials, tribulations, and triumphs of publishing their books. I'm your host, Corey Graham. Join us here every Friday night at 8 p.m. or listen anytime via podcast at Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, TuneIn, and PodServe, to name just a few. The Author Roundtable is sponsored by ReaderHouse Online Bookstore, where the independent new authors come first. I'm looking at a novel that follows one man's journey to discover his lost memories and untapped powers. It's written by Sebastian Noir, and it's titled The Chorus Wars. And I get to find out more about this book. The author, Sebastian, is right here with me. Sebastian, welcome to the show. I really appreciate you being here with me tonight.
Hey, thanks for inviting me on.
Absolutely. Sebastian, I'm curious about the Chorus Wars and what readers are going to find here. Can you tell me about it?
I don't know. I've always thought that books were better when the bad guys were hard to determine. And I think that it's really mercurial, the book is. Like, the goal is to keep it sort of elements of mystery I built in, I don't know, to make it more interesting over the course of the book.
And what sorts of readers did you have in mind for this, Sebastian?
Probably anywhere from the late teens. There's a bit of mature content, nothing too extreme. But on up into as old as your 30s or 40s, I mean, it's really like, I would just not recommend it for anything under teens, but as long as you're a sci-fi fan and you're mature enough to cope with it, then I think it would be fine.
How did this come about, Sebastian? What gave you the idea to start on it?
I've been writing since I was young, like 10 or 12 years old, pretty young, and I just pieced together a bunch of short stories that I've written and lost over the years and just kind of finally put a whole book together. And that was just kind of like, it's just kind of over the years, I just built it up.
So this is your first one then?
It's my first completed novel. Yeah, I had a bunch of short stories, but none of them were, I never published them or sent them to magazines or anything.
So how long of a process was this for you? The writing, the publishing thing, everything?
I mean, it was like 2.5 to 3 years of writing, and it took about a year total to get it completely ironed out with the publishers. But I think I started it like 5 years ago, technically, but I'd spent like a year of it just collecting dust in a drawer, basically.
So once you got the ball rolling with the publisher, with Hawes and Jenkins, and you started that publishing process, there's just so much involved there. What did you find the most challenging part about that for you?
I think the most challenging part is editing for me, because you have to reread. So like as a writer, of course, you write the book, then you read the book. You know, you write a chapter, read the chapter about half a dozen times while you iron it out and you get it all cleaned up. And then, they send you a fully edited manuscript, and you have to read over it and make sure everything is how you want it to be, and then, send them corrections. And you do that 2 or 3 times. So I think like that was the hardest part, just because I've read my book so many times, obviously, as the person who wrote it. So it was like, that part was difficult for me, just rereading it and rereading it and rereading it over and over again.
Then that day comes, it finally all pays off. You get the first copy in and you're holding it in your hands. It's a real thing.
Yes.
Sebastian, what's that like?
Oh, it was great. I mean, I called my dad and my grandparents, and they were both extremely ecstatic about it, the whole situation. All my family really was, but those were the two that I was really in tune with through the whole process. I would give them every single step. I'm sure they got annoyed throughout the publication process.
And now you're officially a published author, Sebastian. So what would you say is the most rewarding aspect of all that for you?
I think that completing it all, like having something finished and behind you, like the finishing of something is like a lot more, it's a lot bigger of a deal than I think people make it out. Like anyone can start doing something and stop, but to like get all the way to the end and be able to look back and see how you've come, and then look forward and see like where you might want to go from there is also a pretty amazing feeling.
Looking down the road, do you think you would write some more, publish some more?
Yeah, I have a second book. Currently, I'm literally in the prologue and first chapter to this current book that I'm working on. It's very new. I've got a lot of notes and very little like written out in a real way, but it's starting to come together in the early stages.
So is the sci-fi genre the one that you find yourself reading most often?
It's iffy. I read mostly nonfiction, actually. I love things about science, and I love things about writing and literature, but I read kind of a little bit of everything. I like a little bit of fantasy. I like a little bit of science fiction. My favorite writer was probably Tolkien easily, just because of how he writes, but also like a lot of the classic sci-fi people.
Well, what an interesting book. I think a lot of readers are going to love this. Again, the title is The Chorus Wars. It's written by Sebastian Noir and published by Hawes and Jenkins Publishing. So find it at Amazon or Barnes & Noble or iTunes and also at traditional brick-and-mortar stores. Sebastian, thanks again for coming on the show and telling me all about The Chorus Wars. It was great talking with you.
Yes, sir. You too. Very much. Thank you.
The audiobook edition of the book by Brooks C. Harmon. It's titled The Baseball King. It's out now, and Brooks is here with me now, and we're going to talk all about this. Brooks, welcome to the show. Thanks so much for joining me tonight.
Hey, Corey. It's an honor to be here.
I'm really glad to be talking with you, and I'm curious to learn all about The Baseball King, Brooks. Can you tell me all about it?
Sure. It's about a kid. He had a famous left-hand pitcher that played pro ball, and he unexpectedly passed away. And so he formed a team of his own with his friends. And throughout his life, he faces challenges through life on and off the field.
And what sorts of readers did you have in mind when you were working on this?
Young readers, pretty much like any age, but mostly like young readers, probably like upper elementary, middle school, high school.
Would you say it's more geared towards baseball enthusiasts?
Yeah, it's kind of like a Christian fiction type of book, and also baseball as well.
So how did this come about, Brooks? How did you get the idea for the book?
Well, I'm an only child, so when I was younger, I had to entertain myself a lot, so I kind of used my creative mind, and I started to think about these ideas. I started writing them down, and then I started adding on a little bit to each story, and eventually it came out to be The Baseball King.
So is your first time doing something like this, writing and being published?
It is.
Congratulations. So how long of a journey was this for you? The writing, the publishing, the audiobook, all of that?
Well, I started doing the writing a few years ago, probably in 2020, and I continue adding to it each year. Then in 2023, I submitted to the publishing company, and then they published into the book, and now it's going on Audible this year, last year technically in 2024.
So after all the time and work that you put into this, there was nothing like seeing that finished product finally, and there it was, you were holding the first copy in your hands. What was that moment like, Brooks?
I was like, I successfully done it. I have my own work in my hand and out for others to read. I felt really proud.
So looking down the road, do you see yourself writing and publishing more, do you think?
Definitely.
So do you have anything in mind, or are you just looking to maybe exploring other things?
I'm actually putting down thoughts for my second book right now.
So a lot of people listening to us right now, Brooks, are authors who are just starting out, and I'm sure you've learned a lot along the way of doing this all for the first time. So is there anything you might have picked up that you could throw out there as maybe some advice for all the authors who are just starting out?
Absolutely. When I first started, I started basically writing down names and just putting down stuff, and it's kind of like, where'd this come from and how this happened? So I had to write more sentences and explain it more of how each thing happened. And also talk to family as well about it. That's pretty much what I learned from it.
Now we're talking about the audiobook edition, of course, and so you spent all that time writing, you saw the words on the page and on the screen, and now somebody is reading your book right back to you, Brooks. What's that like? It's
definitely pretty interesting. Kind of like, well, someone's reading the work that I did, and I always kind of find it interesting, hopefully they find it awesome. At the same time, I got to prepare myself they didn't like it, so I have to prepare myself for that. So,
with the audiobook, was it challenging to find just that right voice that you were looking for?
A little, but after listening, I was like, this guy's the right one.
And this is such a big project, a huge thing to take on, and doing it all by yourself, that can be really difficult. And it's often helpful if you have some people around you in your life that they just kind of know you're doing this, and they can just be there to maybe motivate you and encourage you along the way. Brooks, did you have people like that?
I definitely do. I have my tutor who tutors me. She's definitely one. I have this one teacher that motivates me, and I have my aunts, but they all motivate me. My parents influenced me also as well, and my whole family influenced me.
That's wonderful. Well, I think readers and audiobook listeners are really going to be into this. Again, the book's titled The Baseball King. It's written by Brooks C. Harmon and published by the Audiobook Network. So go wherever you usually go to get your audiobooks, and you'll be able to find it, like Audible, iTunes, and Amazon. Well, Brooks, thank you again for talking with me tonight. Tell me all about The Baseball King. It was really great talking.
Thank you, Corey.
The Elf and the Fallen Oak. It's the name of the new book written by Davina Sheckell, and it's a tale of adventure and friendship, and we're going to learn more about it. Davina is right here with me. Davina, welcome to the ReaderHouse Author Roundtable. I appreciate you being here with me tonight.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Davina, can you tell me all about the Elf and the Fallen Oak and the story you've told here?
Well, the story is a medieval fantasy about a 15-year-old girl. She finds an elf trapped beneath a fallen tree trunk in the forest, and she helps him get free. But later, her village is attacked by forest elves who kidnap two people they're very close to her. So then my main character goes on an adventure to save them, enlisting the aid of the elf she freed in the forest, even though it's his people who took the captives to begin with. It touches a lot on bravery and kindness and things like that.
I love it. Where did the idea for this come from, Davina? What inspired you to do it?
I have a very active imagination. I'm often inspired by simple things. I remember I was listening to a YouTube video, honestly. It was like fantasy world. And honestly, things just started popping into my head, and that's where it started from.
Have you ever done anything like this before? What's your writing background look like?
This is the first book I've ever published. I've written stories since I was a child. They never really came to much. I had to kind of put my writing on the back burner for a while, and then I got started a few years ago. I'm very excited to see where it goes from here.
So once you sat down, you got started on The Elf and the Fallen Oak, and clear up through when it was published and all ready to go out there. Was this a long period of time for you?
Honestly, I can't answer that. It's been long enough that I don't remember for sure. I want to say that it was just kind of a few weeks. It is only a 10-chapter novella, so, it didn't take me super long to write, but it's kind of guessing at this point. I can't say for sure.
So there's the writing of the manuscript, and then you send it off to your publisher, to Christian Faith, and start that whole publishing process. There's a lot involved in all of that. Davina, what did you find the most challenging part of that publishing end of things for you?
The most challenging was probably the editing. There's a lot of marks on that paper, and you got to figure out what all you want to change and what you don't, and get help from people around. I had to get help from people I knew to sit down with me and help me through it and stuff. So that was pretty challenging.
So this is a long time in the making for you, and then finally that one day comes and it's a real thing. You're finally holding The Elf and the Fallen Oak in your hands, your first copy. Davina, what was that moment like for you?
Well, not going to lie, I was screaming. No, I'm not a teenager, but, yeah, I was just very, very happy and excited, taking pictures of me with the book and sending it to people. I was very, very happy.
I love it. Well, now it's official. You're a published author. So when you think about that, what's the most rewarding thing to you about that?
Probably sharing my work with people and hearing their feedback. I just love sharing my work with people. I've loved doing that for a while now. I love to hear their reactions. So I enjoy getting messages from acquaintances who have bought or read my book, and I like to read the reviews, things like that.
So what are the chances that we'll be seeing more? Will there maybe be a follow-up to this or some other kind of stuff you're doing in the future?
I haven't decided if I'm writing a sequel yet, to be honest, but I have multiple books in progress right now. So I do not plan to quit writing, that's for sure.
Wonderful. Now, when you are sitting down, you're writing, is writer's block ever something that you have to get through?
Oh, yes. I am human. That definitely happens.
What do? Do you have a strategy, something that you do to get those words going again?
I mean, sometimes I just have to push through it and put something down on the page. And a lot of times I hate it to begin with, but you just put it on the page anyway. And then later on, if you have to, you can go back and fix it. But often I've gone back and reread it and decided that it really wasn't as bad as I thought, So you just got to push through it and put something down, whether you like it or not. You can always fix it in later drafts.
I'm looking at the cover. This is a beautiful cover. How difficult was that to put that all together?
It took a little bit to get it correct, but once we got the ball rolling, it wasn't too bad. A few weeks, maybe.
Well, this sounds like a great medieval fantasy. I think readers are really going to be into this. Again, the book's titled The Elf and the Fallen Oak. It's written by Davina Sheckell and published by Christian Faith Publishing, so it's available really everywhere, like Amazon and Barnes & Noble and iTunes, and also right down the street at your local bookshop. Davina, thank you so much again for coming on the show. It was really nice talking with you tonight.
Thank you. It was nice to be here.
Author Sean Ferguson has written a new book that's a discussion aimed at helping readers discover a new worldview. The book's titled A Layman's Look at Life, A Road Less Traveled. We're going to be talking all about this. The author, Sean, is here with me now at the ReaderHouse Author Roundtable. Sean, welcome to the show. Thanks for joining me tonight.
Thanks for having me.
Sean, can you tell me all about A Layman's Look at Life and what readers are going to find?
Well, the book started out really as just an exercise. What it wound up being really is a small book of apologetics wrapped in a autobiographical narrative. I didn't really think I was going to write a book when I started writing it.
What was that spark that got you started?
Well, when I was a kid, I was raised as a Roman Catholic. We didn't study the Bible. We had something called catechism. And then after the fourth grade, my parents took us out of Catholic school and we switched to Christian Science, which was a really strange sort of whiplash in terms of thinking. Honestly, by the time I was a junior in high school, I went away to school. I quit going to church altogether for about the next 54 years. So when my wife and I finally retired to this small suburb of Chattanooga, Tennessee, she wanted to find the church, and she did. And we did a Bible study there. Actually, what we did was study a book called The Non-Prophet's Guide to the End Times by Todd Hampson. And that's where I found out that many of the prophecies in the Bible have already come to pass 100% accurately. And that pretty much blew my mind. I've always been kind of a skeptical person. Even though I believed in Jesus, I believed in God, the whole Bible story, all the stuff I was raised with as a kid, it was stuff I learned by rote. It didn't really sink in. We just said, this is what I believe because that's what I was told I believe. I started to research this, and I did a lot of digging and got away from eschatology, which this was actually all about, and started getting into apologetics. And it dawned on me that even as a kid, I was somewhat of an apologist, even though I didn't know what that meant. And by that, I mean, I would try and defend the reality that God existed by coming up with my own point of view, which hence the layman's look. I'm not qualified. I didn't go to seminary. I don't have a PhD. But I just came up with some common sense thinking about what proves the existence of God, and then using what I learned about prophecy in the Bible, learning how to read it and learning how to understand what it was saying. And it just blew my mind. So the whole thing was just a flash of inspiration that caused me to write the book.
Sean, what kinds of readers do you think would get the most out of this?
Honestly, I've been asked a number of times what my target market would be. I wrote this thing out of a pure inspiration and desire to want to witness. I always felt like I had not accomplished enough in life. I didn't feel like I was leaving any footprints on the planet, so to speak. I just felt like I should have done more or done something more. Here I was 70 years old trying to figure out what the hell that was. So I think in reality, as I look at it, I think a younger audience, the 18 to 36 or 40-year-olds, the guys that really haven't been raised with movies like The Ten Commandments and The Greatest Story Ever Told, who haven't had that, what I would say, Christian indoctrination. When I use the word indoctrination, that makes me a little queasy because the one thing I never liked is people proselytizing. I did not like to be preached at. I tended to shy away from it. And even though these people meant well and were trying to share what they knew with me, I kind of cringed. And I read my book and I think, you know what? It kind of comes off sounding that way, even though I don't mean it to. But I have to let people know what my personal experience was in learning that the Bible was a trustworthy source of information. The problem is that, particularly with religion spoils it. Religion almost ruins people's access to God because there are so many differing points of view. There are so many different preachers with different takes on the Bible. And there is a huge tendency for a lot of people to take scripture and twist it to their own, whatever it is they want to say. And I don't think that should be considered trustworthy. I think people should use the Bible, but do a lot of fact checking.
I think a lot of readers are going to find this a blessing. Again, it's titled A Layman's Look at Life, A Road Less Traveled. It's written by Sean Ferguson and published by Covenant Books, so it's available really everywhere. Go on over to Amazon or Barnes & Noble or iTunes, also traditional brick-and-mortar stores, and you'll be able to pick it up. Well, Sean, thanks again for joining me and telling me all about A Layman's Look at Life. It was great talking with you.
Thank you very much.
This is a coming-of-age tale with valuable life lessons. It's the new book written by Gregg DeVoogd, and it's titled Easy Lesson Learned the Hard Way. And we're going to talk all about this. Gregg is right here with me now at the ReaderHouse Author Roundtable. Gregg, welcome to the show. Thanks for being here tonight with me.
Thank you.
Gregg, can you tell me all about Easy Lesson Learned the Hard Way and what readers are going to find here?
Oh, man, it's based on a real-life story of a friend and I that did not take his mom's words carefully, and we learned a lesson really hard way where we could have done it easy and just listened to her. And, the book's on that and about the power of forgiveness and about fires and stuff like that. Try to make it fun, entertaining.
And what kinds of readers did you have in mind for this, Gregg?
It started out as a children's book, but with all the rave reviews that I've been getting on it, I've had elderly people up in the upper 80s, middle age, down to their 20s and way younger, absolutely just love it. And a lot of them can relate to it some way in their life, even as adults.
So what does your writing background look like? Have you done a lot of this before?
No, this is absolutely completely new to me. I never dreamed or even thought that I would write a children's book or a book altogether.
So what sparked you to do that and take the plunge?
With learning disabilities and being told a lot that I wouldn't be able to do something like this, I finally just jotted down memories on a specific idea and just sat down to put it all together. And then over time, just added stuff into it and changed it up, fixed it up where I thought would be good enough.
So overall, was this a long journey from beginning to end, writing the book and getting it published and all?
Yes, it was over 10 years in the making. It was taken twice in the past and finally got the clear from the Texas Sheriff's Department and the California DEA to go ahead and start over. I started all over again on it to get it published. I gave up. My daughter found a new script that I wrote between her books. I didn't think it was going to be possible. And she read it, absolutely loved it. And she asked if this was a real story. I said, yes. And how do you know it's real? And I said, well, don't worry about it. And she goes, so it's a book? I said, yes. And she goes, why don't you get it published or turned into a book? And I was like, well, I don't know about that yet. And finally was able to find a publisher that accepted it and somebody that I could trust. Another military person that I know ended up getting his book published and asked for a referral, and he sent me to that Christian Faith Publishing, and they've just been amazing to help me finally get it completed.
Yeah, once you handed your manuscript off to them and you started that whole process, there's so much involved in all of that.
Yes.
Gregg, what did you find the most challenging about the whole publishing end of things?
I guess the money you spend on it and each edit, there was so many different parts to it that I never realized until publishing this book. The time frame on it took way longer than I thought it would, but overall, I'm happy that it, finally seen a light at the tunnel and got it published, and yeah.
This was over a decade in the making, and it finally came, your first copy. You're standing there looking at it, holding this thing, Gregg. What was that like for you?
Oh, man, it was like I was almost standing on top of the world, and then at the same time, you're excited, but then I'm my biggest critic, so I was sort of at the same point. It's like all the feelings at once hitting you, nervous, excited, everything. And then it's, okay, how do you get it out there? Are people going to really like it? And with the feedback and the schools actually implementing my book into part of their curriculum and stuff now, it's just something brand new to me. And to accept the feedback is just remarkable.
What a wonderful book. What an important message it has. Again, the title is Easy Lesson Learned the Hard Way. It's written by Gregg DeVoogd, published by Christian Faith Publishing. It's available really everywhere, like Amazon or Barnes & Noble, iTunes, and also traditional brick-and-mortar stores. Gregg, thanks again for coming on the show and telling me all about this. It was really nice talking with you.
Thank you. Same here.
I'm holding a book right now. It's a story of an ant who sets off on her own to see the world, but soon finds herself hopelessly lost. The name of the book is Deanna, a Tiny Ant. It's written by Sylvia M Damaso, and Sylvia is right here with me now at the ReaderHouse Author Roundtable. We get to talk all about this. Sylvia, welcome to the show. Thanks for being here tonight.
Hi. It's so nice to finally meet you, and thank you for inviting me. I've been looking forward to this conversation.
I've been looking forward to talking to you and learning all about Deanna, a tiny ant. So, Sylvia, can you tell me all about this book and what readers are going to find here?
The book is about a little ant, and her name is Deanna. She lives with her Nana and her mom, and she is a curious little girl. She wants to go outside, but she is too young to go out alone. But she figures a way. She finds her way of mapping it out and making plans, and she has a lot of fun doing it. And then she runs into a situation. I can't tell you the whole book.
Sylvia, what kinds of readers did you have in mind for this?
Boys and girls, ages at least 8 years old, because my Deanna, she is going to be 7, and she already knows how to read the book. So children of those ages, between 7 and 8. But people read to kids at all kinds of ages, and I'm hoping that I tell a lot of parents that you can read to your baby while they're still in the womb. So that's something that I've always done. So you can read. You can read to your child at any age. And the pictures are in the book, 8 by 10. They're really big, so the kids will be really interested in looking into the story.
So how did this book come about, Sylvia? What gave you the idea and the inspiration for it?
Oh, gosh, it's such a funny story. My granddaughter and I were going out, and so we were waiting in front of our house, and we were just looking down on the ground and saw 2 ants trying to find each other, I'm going to say. And so we started talking about it, and she kept on saying, well, the little ant seems, lost, like she can't find the big one. And so we were trying to help her. And then right there, I got like a story in mind. And so I always carry a pen and a pad. So as we got in the car, we did help the little ant. And so we were laughing about it all the way through the car ride. And then I was just jotting down ideas of a story. And writing is something that I've always wanted to do. And finally, here I am, published.
So this is your first published book then?
It is. It's my first one that is published. I'm currently working on a second one. It's so exciting. It's just so much fun.
Absolutely. So being your first book, Sylvia, did this take you a long time to write and get published and all?
It has a process, but to actually write this story, I wrote it before I got to the store. It was already written. And so it just seems to come to me really simple. I find that very odd, maybe gifted and blessed. So I just wrote the story in the car, and once I got home, I started really editing it. And then I looked for a publisher, and I found a publishing company, and I sent them the story, and they said, well, this is a nice story. We'll publish it. And so it really takes a lot of time because you're going back and forth with editing and illustrations, and a lot of the work comes from you, comes from me. They do what I ask them to do. But it took actually a whole year.
Now, one thing that's really important when it comes to books like this is the illustrations. Was that a challenge for you to get just the way you wanted?
It wasn't a challenge because I knew exactly what I wanted. It's getting them to understand what you want to see. Mm-hmm. So you have to put those words down exactly how you want to see it. If you want the sun up, if you want the sun down, if you want a rainbow, if you want big trees, little trees. Because Deanna is a tiny ant, everything is so large. So everything is really big for her. So I had to make sure that everything looked really big. So the reader will see that, she's a tiny ant. So it's just stuff like that. It's a lot of fun because I'm laughing through the whole time of putting my imagination to life.
Well, I think readers are going to love this. Again, the name of the book is Deanna, a Tiny Ant. It's written by Sylvia M Damaso and published by Newman Springs Publishing. So get it at places like Amazon and Barnes & Noble, iTunes, and also traditional brick-and-mortar stores. Sylvia, it's been wonderful talking with you tonight. Thank you again for coming on the show.
Thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me today. It's been a real pleasure.
Sitting down with me right now here at the ReaderHouse Author Roundtable, I'm really happy to welcome author Lorenzo Alexander Chambers. Lorenzo, welcome to the show. Appreciate you being here with me tonight.
Thank you for having me.
I wanted to congratulate you. You have a new book out titled For the Good of All and to the Harm of None, a worldview through a philanthropic lens. Now, Lorenzo, can you tell me all about this book and what you've written about here?
Sure. The book is a philosophical reflection on my part that I began during COVID, looking at it from a worldview of pandemics happening every 100 years and just how mankind is treating itself and treating one another. And the idea was that if things across the world do not drastically change, then we're going to constantly repeat these 100-year pandemics and wars and famine, when in reality, if mankind took a philanthropic view of the world, we could eliminate disease and famine and all the things that are wrong with the world. And so I'm just offering the idea of philanthropy is engaging in endeavors that advance the well-being of humanity. And so I give several examples of where philanthropy shows up in the world. Most people think philanthropy is about, wealthy people giving money to charities, and that's not what it is at all. I mean, philanthropy can be the sanitation worker who picks up the garbage if he or she are looking at their work through a philanthropic lens and they understand that they're contributing to the well-being of humanity by making the place sanitary, right? And people not having diseases. And so I kind of talk about that. I talk about the idea of there's one race, and it's the human race. So it's research-based. And so the idea of we're all one race comes out of the idea of a species is that which can procreate, right? And so, for example, an elephant and a giraffe can't procreate. They are different species. But whether you're black or white or Asian or Latino or wherever you come from in the world, we all can procreate. And so if we start looking at each other as human beings first and our ethnicities or our tribes, if you will, secondarily, then I think the world could be a better place.
Lorenzo, what sorts of readers did you have in mind when you were working on this?
Originally, the idea was just for the lay reader. I grew up in a family where it was a blue-collar family. Many of my older relatives did not go to college, but I always felt that they were intelligent, well-read. The conversations around the dinner table were all about current events and politics and the economy, what's happening in the world. And so I think we've gotten to a point where people have to be experts or professionals for people to listen to them or for people to be critical thinkers. And I think anyone who's interested in what they can do to develop a philanthropic mindset, to have a peaceful life and to contribute to the well-being of humanity, I think the book's for any one of them. Anybody, right, who reads. It doesn't matter your college level or educational level as long as you love to read. And the book is actionable, which is what I like. But secondarily, I would say for academics, I think it'd be good for like a college, for like an English class or a social, I wouldn't say an English class. I would say more of a social studies type of class. It's a broad audience.
Now, have you ever done anything like this before, Lorenzo, writing and publishing and all that, or are you fairly new to all this?
No, this is my third book that I've written. My first book, The Principal, School Leadership in Real Time. I'm a principal of an elementary school. I wrote that back in, I want to say 2010, somewhere around there. Then my second book, Gypsy Woman, which is a fiction novel, I wrote that, I want to say, in the winter of 2019, somewhere around there. So this is my third book.
For the Good of All and to the Harm of None, is this a book that took you a long time to write and then put through that publishing process?
Yes. Writers understand that it's a long process. Each of my books took, just writing, I want to say approximately 3 years. I have a full-time job, and so I'm not a full-time writer. And so just finding time to write and trying to be disciplined to write. It's probably about a year to get it edited and all the other things that are necessary or required to get to publishing.
Well, what a great message this book has. I definitely recommend it. Again, the title is For the Good of All and to the Harm of None, a worldview through a philanthropic lens. This is written by Lorenzo Alexander Chambers and published by Newman Springs Publishing, so you can get it pretty much everywhere, like Amazon or Barnes & Noble or iTunes, and also right down the street at your local bookshop. Lorenzo, it's been really great talking with you here tonight. Thanks again for coming on the show.
Once again, thank you, and I really appreciate it. All the best.
Sitting down with me right now here at the ReaderHouse Author Roundtable, I'm really happy to be talking with author Penny Pryor. Penny, welcome to the show. Thanks for being here with me tonight.
Thank you for inviting me.
I wanted to congratulate you. You have a new book out titled From Showgirl to God's Girl. Penny, can you tell me all about what you've written here?
Well, it's a story of my life, and I wanted the people to know how I lived in Las Vegas and what I did in Las Vegas, and how I found the Lord, or we got together through WMBI radio broadcast, and I was listening to Dr. Swindell, and I heard him say, "Are you feeling like you're alone and lost and looking for someone to love you?" And at that time I was, because I had worked in Las Vegas and came back to Chicago, hoping to find the person that I wanted to be. I was searching through the radio, and Dr. Swindell asked the right question, and I answered him. Of course, he couldn't hear me, but I answered him anyway. When I verbally said what I did, I believe that was what I was looking for.
Penny, what kinds of readers did you have in mind when you were working on this?
I wanted to reach the people that may be searching, like I was searching, for something more than the entertainment business, more than the sound of applause, more than just that exterior thing that would satisfy me temporarily. I needed something that would be comforting and there in my life permanently.
What does your writing background look like, Penny? Are you new to something like this, or do you have experience doing it?
No, I was not an A student, and I never felt like I could be an A student. I just wanted to be an entertainer. And I didn't feel like I needed too much, because all I needed was just singing and how to perform, how to get an audience. And I had that within me. So I didn't think I had to need any more knowledge than that.
Once you got started writing this, Penny, was this a long journey for you, clear up through when it was put through the publishing process and ready to go out there?
I had no idea of what it was going to be like. It was my husband, who was alive at that time, and also a writer and a singer, and we had a lot in common. So he encouraged me, after he found out more about me, what I should tell the public and show how God had worked in my life and made the transition. So he was the one that was advantageous in helping me to get going at it. And every day he'd say, "Did you write today?" And I would give him the paper I had written, and then he would critique it. And together we had worked on the story that he wanted to bring out in me, so the public could hear it, so they would know how the Lord had worked in my life. I was more than an entertainer. I realized I was a vehicle for the Lord and his creation to do what he had programmed me to do. I look at the Lord as being the puppeteer, and we are the puppets. And he was pulling my string to direct me to what he wanted me to do. Does that make sense to you?
Absolutely. So you had so much time, so much work into this, and then that day finally came, and there was your first copy. It finally got to you, and you held your book for the first time, Penny. What was that moment like for you?
I must tell you, in all honesty, it was like a bittersweet time, only because my husband wasn't there to share it with me. He had been the essence of why I wrote it, why I wanted the public to hear it, and to know what the Lord had done in my life. But he wasn't there for me to share it with him. So I felt kind of bittersweet. But in his spirit, I feel that he is looking down on me. I think he's up there looking down on me and sharing what he wanted me to do while he was alive.
Looking down the road, Penny, do you see yourself maybe writing and publishing more?
I really don't. I'm 88 years old, and I'm grateful for what God has given me and the ability to do it.
Well, what an inspiring story, a journey of transformation and faith that I think a lot of readers are going to be inspired by. Again, the title of the book is From Showgirl to God's Girl. It's written by Penny Pryor and published by Christian Faith Publishing, so go really anywhere that you normally pick up your books and you'll be able to find this, like Amazon and Barnes & Noble and iTunes and also traditional brick-and-mortar stores. Penny, it's been truly wonderful talking with you tonight and learning all about your story and from showgirl to God's girl. Thanks again for being here.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity, and I really mean this for the people. Trust in what happened to me, and it could happen to you.
Author Marilyn D. Alcorn has written an inspiring guide to spiritual renewal. It's titled U-Turn to Paradise, the day by all day journey to achieve a lifetime destiny. Marilyn is joining me right now here at the ReaderHouse Author Roundtable, and we're going to talk all about this book. Marilyn, welcome to the show. Thank you for being here with me tonight.
And thank you, Corey, for having me.
Well, the pleasure's all mine. I'm curious about U-Turn to Paradise, Marilyn. Can you tell me about what readers are going to find here?
Well, they're going to find a couple of things. Mainly what they'll find is kind of a digest of other individuals who have given testimonials about their personal experience, spiritual experience in these modern times with God, working with God and working with Jesus and trying to uphold those Christian values that seem to be fleeting right about now in our culture. So I put together those interviews and wrote them out. Also, they will find that in the Bible we've heard traditional stories in the Bible of different characters and their faith walk and their experience with either God or Jesus, going into the Old Testament with God and into the New Testament with Jesus, his disciples. And so I use also some of those stories, like the story of David, not the one with David and Goliath, but the one with David and Bathsheba. So these kind of things were also utilized. And then, of course, the objective of the book is for individuals today to take a second look at God's call and to take a second look at their spiritual nature. You know, as humans, we have a spiritual side as well as a rational side. And I help people take a look and revisit the idea of our spiritual selves.
Mm. So how did this come about, Marilyn? What sparked you to write this?
Well, it happened to me. A couple of things. It happened to me when I was in my maybe late 30s. No, early 30s, late 20s, early 30s. And meaning it happened to me that I had to revisit my spiritual side and to own up to the fact that I was a spiritual being and I had some dramas. Well, let's just put it this way. Resolving those personal dramas had to do with owning up to my spiritual self and my spiritual side. That was one of the things. And I look back on that experience when I was also confronted with a book that was referenced almost weekly by my pastor, a book called Heaven by Randy Alcorn. No relationship as far as I know. My last name is the same as Randy's. But when I read the book, I got to thinking, I said, you know what? As believers, one of the main things we think about is going to heaven and the afterlife. That is a blessing and a benefit that God has promised us as believers. But yet, no one ever thinks about how to get ready for that trip. I mean, it's a trip. We think about, okay, we die, but it's more than that because of our spiritual side. We don't realize about our spiritual side, and so we don't think that there's things that we should be doing with our spiritual self to prepare us for that trip. So Randy Alcorn focused about heaven, and I thought about how do we prepare for that trip? And then I thought again about back. I look back on my experience, how I made a U-turn in my life, a spiritual U-turn. So the book is called U-Turn to Paradise. And so what better way to do than highlight some of the things I experienced and then help people to prepare on how to pack for their trip, the ultimate trip as believers to get to heaven.
Looking ahead, Marilyn, do you think we'll see some more books from you?
I'm hoping so. I want to kind of follow up with what I started with Adrian's Revenge, because as you can see, the idea between good and evil and the devil and God at war and as adversaries, it has gone on for ages. What I did with Adrian's Revenge is just one part of the story, and I would like to maybe follow it with a couple of other parts.
Oh, what a blessing this book is going to be to so many readers. Again, the title is U-Turn to Paradise, The day-by-day, by-all-day journey to achieve a lifetime destiny. This is written by Marilyn D. Alcorn and published by Christian Faith Publishing, so find it everywhere, really, like Amazon and Barnes & Noble and iTunes and also traditional brick-and-mortar stores. Thank you again, Marilyn, for joining me tonight and telling me all about this book. It's been really great talking with you.
No problem, Corey, and thank you for having me.
We're talking about a book right now here at the ReaderHouse Author Roundtable that follows a young girl who achieves her tennis dreams. The book's titled Juliet and the Two Talking Tennis Balls Who Made Her a World Champion. This is written by DeNevi, and Dawn is right here with me now at the ReaderHouse Author Roundtable. We're going to talk all about it. Dawn, welcome to the show. Thank you for joining me.
Well, thank you. Looking forward to it.
I'm looking forward to learning all about Juliet and the Two Talking Tennis Balls that made her a world champion. Dawn, can you tell me all about this book?
Well, sure. I'd like to begin by letting you know how it all came into being. Juliet is the granddaughter of a very close friend of mine, Angela, and they live about 5-6 hours away from Pebble Beach. They visit every so often. Juliet has been an integral part of our life. I could hardly wait until she was old enough to get into ballet, and then once she was in ballet, to get her into tennis, and that occurred about 10 months later. And she's been playing regularly. She's now 9. She can drive that tennis ball from the baseline of hers to the baseline of her opposite. It is incredible to watch. I'm so proud of her, and she's doing very well. Now, whether she continues it in the years to come is really up to her. We can't say, we can't predict, but we're sure hoping because tennis has become an integral part of her life. The longer you play tennis, the longer you're going to live. In other words, if you begin early. But you can begin tennis at any age.
So, Dawn, how did the story come about for Juliet and the Two Talking Tennis Balls?
The story came about because I had been hitting against the backboard. All of a sudden, I hear plop behind me. And I turned around, and here was a tennis ball that had been thrown over the fence. It was cut open. It had mud in it. And it was totally useless. And I thought to myself, if this ball could talk, my God, what it would tell you about tennis, about the people who played it over the last 10, 15, 20 years. Juliet and her mom and dad had arrived the night before for the weekend. I walked in, and I said, Juliet, come and hear what Two Talking Tennis Balls have to say. Here's one here. And then behind the court, there was another one, and so I brought them both home to you. You should have seen her eyes widen. She got right up, she put her dolls down, and she walked right to me. At that moment, I knew I had a children's book. And off and on over the years, I kind of thought the same thing. What about tennis balls that can talk? What could they teach you? Well, that was it. I knew I had to continue that. I wrote that book in maybe 4 days, 4 nights, and it was based on everything that was pent up inside me, and it was everything I wanted Juliet to be, and the lessons are from the top pros who played tennis, especially those who played in the early part of the 20th century, that is to say, in the 1900s. Because they knew the game just as well as any pro today. Certain things have changed, but the lessons are all accurately portrayed from the books that those early players wrote.
Well, it sounds like this is a great book. I think a lot of readers are going to be into it. Again, the title is Juliet and the Two Talking Tennis Balls Who Made Her a World Champion. This is written by DeNevi and published by Covenant Books, so you can find it really everywhere, like on Amazon and Barnes & Noble and iTunes and also traditional brick-and-mortar stores. Well, Dawn, it's been great talking with you tonight and finding out all about Juliet and the Two Talking Tennis Balls. Thanks again.
You're welcome.
We hope you enjoyed this edition of the ReaderHouse Author Roundtable, where authors from all walks of life come together to discuss the trials, tribulations, and triumphs of publishing their books. We hope to see you back here every Friday night at 8 p.m. or listen anytime via podcast at Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, TuneIn, and PodServe, to name just a few. The Author Roundtable is sponsored by ReaderHouse Online Bookstore, where independent new authors come first.